Good evening and welcome to the Middleton Common Council. Tonight is March 18th and it is 7:30 p.m. I'm calling the meeting to order and requesting assistance.
Sure. For roll call, Alder Schaefer.
Here.
Alder Madden.
Here.
Alder Kalish.
Here.
Mayor Kuhn.
Here.
Alder Nelson.
Here.
Alder Jackson.
Here.
Alder Hanilo. Alder Lorman.
Here.
Alder Crow.
Here.
All right, moving on to public comments. Just as a reminder for anyone who would like to speak, anyone can speak about anything they want. You have 3 minutes and I ask that you will state your name and your address before speaking. First up is Alder Jackson.
This is Alder Jackson, 3213 Patty Lane, Middleton, Wisconsin. I'm speaking on behalf of Charles Myers, our Public Works Chair. There's a public comment he wanted us to mention.
In his own capacity.
In his own capacity. So it states, I'm submitting this comment in support of the proposed ordinance change regarding fees in lieu in a personal capacity because of the Public Works Committee has not met on this topic. I do wish to draw your attention to the fact that our representative to the Water Resources Management and Stormwater Utility Commission, Dawn Noor, seconded the motion to adopt this ordinance change during the WRMC meeting on 2/19/25. Members of City Council, I watched both the Water Resource Management and Stormwater Utility Commission and License and Ordinance Committee meetings where this ordinance change was adopted in full. I wish to draw Council's attention to the words of our city attorney, which began at approximately 5 p.m. of the WMRC meeting. They are transcribed below. It does address the issue that is being put in play for an existing situation. It needs to be cleared up because it puts us in kind of an untenable position of two different sides having different positions. And it's my job to put the city in the correct legal position. I think the correct legal position is to fix something that is not workable or likely legal. When our attorney tells us that the city's current legal position is unattainable, not likely legal, and something which will expose the city to legal liability, alarm bells should be ringing. Middleton pays our city's attorney to provide us with expert legal advice, and in this instant, he has done so. The ordinance revision authored with staff and approved by a 4-2 vote by the WMRC is his expert legal advice. As responsible stewards of the city's money, it is vitally important to put the city in the best legal position possible. That means adopting this ordinance. I regret not being able to deliver this comment personally. However, I have spent this afternoon ill. Sincerely, Charles Myers.
Thank you. Next is Ginny Corwin.
Ginny, is this on? I'm Ginny Corwin. I live at 2319 Middleton Beach Road, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Middleton Beach Road Neighborhood Association regarding ordinance item number 4, stormwater regulations relating to fee in lieu requirements. Although the proposed change affects all developments, we are concerned about potential adverse impacts from this change regarding the proposed development at 2159 Allen Boulevard. This ordinance change has both engineering and legal implications. We know why this change is being proposed from a legal perspective. However, we do not understand the implications of this change from an engineering perspective, and that's the part that has generated the most discussion at Water Resource Management Commission and the License and Ordinance Committee. It's important that the decision makers understand how these changes will affect both developers and the downstream property owners. This ordinance is now over 40 years old, yet the city is hastily changing it with no clear agreement and input from others. On February 19th, the Water Resource Management Commission deliberated for an hour on this proposal. It was clear commissioners were not fully informed of the implications of this change. Still, a motion was made and approved 4-2 with lingering questions from some of them. They recommended it go to License and Ordinance and then to the council. On March 11th, L&O met with only 2 voting alters present. City Attorney Fleming discussed legal points, but engineering expertise was lacking. After a lengthy discussion, they did not agree on any action to take. As council members, what materials have you seen on this change? The proposed change, first of all, removes language designed to protect downstream property owners from the detrimental impact associated with increased surface stormwater runoff from developing areas. And secondly, it allows developers to pay fees in lieu for not meeting infiltration and recharge requirements on the developing site. This effectively robs the downstream property owners of stormwater control devices that partially protect their properties by meeting city ordinances for infiltration and recharge. We ask that you not approve this change tonight and send it back to Water Resource Management Commission. Given the rush to approve it and lack of information on this subject, one can only assume it feels like this is cutting red tape for developers at the expense of surrounding property owners. Please do not vote on this until you thoroughly understand the implications of the changes to all stakeholders, including your own constituents. Thank you for considering the needs of city constituents.
Thank you. Up next is Michelle Bond.
I'm Michelle Bond at 2501 Middleton Beach Road. I'm a citizen and also a member of the Parks and Rec Committee. And I'm speaking about the budget item for the brand new tennis courts and pickleball courts that will be at Lakeview Park. What a great opportunity we have for those courts to be added to our community. And I ask that we think about budgetary items. There's a item number 45 on there is a bounding board, 24-foot long for $28,000. And I just think that we should spend appropriately and what is necessary, and a chain link fence will do what we need. And a bounding board is so that somebody can play tennis on their own and hit against a board. And it has a line on it, so there's an appropriate height for a net. When I was growing up, I hit against my garage door. And so I feel like that would do the same thing. We do have one of those at Lakeview Park now that I've not seen used. So I just want us to spend our resources wisely and have an excellent facility with or without the extra additions. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Does anyone else here wish to speak? Is there anyone online? Okay, that's it for public comments.
Thank you so much. Moving on to proclamations. I'm going to ask the Middleton Youth Hockey team to come on in. I think there's a few of them, so I'll let them walk in. And their parents.
Do you want them up front? Yeah.
Maybe come on up. You guys can come on up front
here.
so that they can see you while we read the proclamation. Okay, so you kind of have to stand in line as if there's a picture because up there's the camera. Okay, and those are coaches right there. So stay close, coaches, okay? Thank you. All right, so proclamation, you guys are doing great. Honoring the Middleton Youth Hockey Squirt C2 team. Whereas the Middleton Youth Hockey Squirt C2 team demonstrated exceptional skill, teamwork, and determination throughout the 2024-2025 season. And whereas on March 1st and March 2nd, 2025, the Middleton Youth Hockey Squirt C2 team competed in the Wisconsin Amateur Hockey Association, or WAHA, state tournament in Grand Chute, Wisconsin. And whereas after a successful regular season, the Middleton Cardinals entered the tournament as the third seed representing the city of Middleton with pride and sportsmanship. And whereas the Cardinals secured victories over Hudson with a score of 9-3 and the Fox Valley Blades with a score of 4-3 on the first day of competition, earning their place in the championship game. And whereas on March 2nd, 2025, the Middleton Cardinals triumphed over the Wanakee Wildcats with a decisive 4-1 victory, earning the title of Waha State Champions. And whereas the team's victory is a testament to the hard work and dedication of the players, coaches, and families, as well as the ongoing support of the Middleton community. And whereas the championship trophy and victory banner will be proudly displayed at Bob Suter's Legacy 20 Arena in Middleton, further inspiring future generations of young hockey players. Now, therefore, I, Emily Kuhn, Mayor of the City of Middleton, on behalf of the City Council and the citizens of Middleton, do hereby congratulate the Middleton Youth Hockey Squirt C2 team on their 2025 Waha State Championship victory and recognize their outstanding achievements and contributions to the spirit of youth athletics in Middleton. This proclamation was adopted at a regular meeting of the Middleton Common Council on the 18th day of March 2025. Is there a motion?
Well, I'm gonna make that motion.
Schaefer will second.
Any comments? We want to say congratulations to the team. And I know that some of you guys live in neighboring towns and cities, so thank you for being here. Thank you to the coaches. Thank you to the families and all of the neighbors cheering you on. All those in favor of approving the proclamation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Oh, and Sam, my husband says congratulations, guys.
Oh, Sam's like, you guys know Holly, right? She plays Middleton. Right, thank you all.
Hey, one of those guys. One of those guys looks like a mini ex-alder.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Wayne Gretzky. No?
That too.
See, the leadership keeps going, you know, even if they
Yeah.
step off council, they keep
That's
leading.
right.
So we're really proud of those guys. All right. We'll let them step out and we'll give them just a few minutes, seconds. All right, moving on to presentation. Okay, great. Still, I want you up at front. You're going to be my helper.
Well, first of all, it's Rob here.
Yeah, Rob is virtual. He's on the,
Yes. It's okay. There's such a crowd that, so you're going to have to help me. So thank you, Brian, for letting us know. The presentation next is from the Wisconsin Policy Forum on Middleton EMS and the Wanakee Area EMS Shared Services Study and Acceptance of Report. And Rob, before you get started, I just want to have everyone say hello to our EMS director. He's usually very busy, doing all things paramedics and EMS. And just so you guys know, in council, he will be retiring soon, although I will miss him dearly. I'm sure we will all miss him. So if you just have a word or two on this to help set it up, please take it away.
Sure, I'll just kind of do a quick recap. About 6 months ago, the City Council commissioned a study to be done by the Wisconsin Policy Forum, primarily to kind of do some long-range planning. We knew for quite a few years that as our community grew and call volumes are going up, and we were facing various decisions about how to best approach that, and were there things we could be doing to perhaps do it in a more efficient, collaborative manner with some of our other EMS partners out there. So once Wisconsin Policy Forum came in and met with all the stakeholders, at least from the EMS operations standpoint, to gather a lot of information, put together this report. I've had a chance to review it. It's, a lot of work went into it, a lot of good data. And I think it's going to set the stage for, some very productive, discussions among all the stakeholders in the communities involved, as well as potentially, improve and enhance some of our current service delivery, even in the context of, the ever expanding call volumes and population growth in our community. So I'll let Rob Hankin, who's the representative from Wisconsin Policy Forum, he will walk everyone through that and can give more details. And then I'll just step back, and then if there's anything more we can discuss after that, we'll take it from there. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Oh, I see somebody else is going to be sharing my screen. That works out just fine. Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Henkin. I'm the immediate past president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum. I was the president for 16 years, stepped down this past July to head up a local foundation, but I'm still working half-time with the forum and am in charge of our service sharing portfolio. It's a pleasure to be with you virtually this evening. As the chief said, I am going to run through the highlights of this report. The report is now available on our website, the full report. Your stakeholders have it. It's about a 40-page report. I plan to spend 12 to 15 minutes just reviewing with you the highlights. Before I do that, I just want to thank the chief. We've done probably close to 20 of these studies for communities across the state. Both he and his counterpart at WAEMS were as cooperative and friendly as could be. Readily available with data to provide when we needed it. So I just want to also give a shout out to the chief and to thank him for his participation. So we can get started and move on to the next slide. What I'm going to do is sort of walk you through the various sections of the report. And so the first section contains a lot of demographic information that hopefully is going to be helpful to you and useful to you, no matter where you go with this. And I guess I should point out from the outset, as I said, we have done close to 20 of these reports statewide. Some have been all about consolidation. Others have been about just assessing the state of fire and emergency medical services in communities and giving some objective third-party advice. We are a fiercely nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. So we're just calling balls and strikes here. We are not consolidation zealots by any means. Sometimes mergers make sense, sometimes they don't. But the first thing we do when we come in and do this type of study is we collect a lot of data, we lay it out, and hopefully this will be helpful to you no matter where you go in the future. So just starting out, we looked at demographic changes, population. These are things you know. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the numbers, but just to tell you what's in the report. So clearly for the Waunakee area, EMS service area, we have seen some substantial population growth in the past decade. Next slide. In terms of your service area, again, impressive growth. I don't have to tell that to you. I should note here that for the slides encompassing Middleton EMS, we were unable to break down the portion of Springfield that you cover, but it's a small portion of your service area anyway. Bottom line takeaway, of course, here is that your population has grown by about 23% over the 14 to 23 timeframe. Next slide. We looked at property values. When we think about the need for emergency medical services, certainly population growth is one factor. The aging of the population can be another factor, and there are data in the report that speak to that issue, but also development. What does your daytime population look like as a result of new commercial development? And so forth. And so we're just showing you on this slide and the next one, equalized values. Obviously, some of the increase in property values is due to values simply increasing, but also in your communities and throughout all of Dane County, we are obviously seeing lots of new construction and new development as well. So we see in the WAEMS service area, more than a doubling of equalized values over this 8-year period. And we can look in the next slide at your service area, and we see almost the same magnitude of growth. We can go to the next one now. The next part of the report lays out some characteristics regarding the service models, the staffing levels, the budgets of the two agencies. Oftentimes, when we consider the potential for collaboration, one of the things we really want to take a look at is what are the similarities and differences of the existing services. In some respects, to the extent that there are lots of similarities in terms of staffing between agencies, in terms of call volumes, in terms of budgets, that might make it easier to think about collaborating in a variety of different ways, as opposed to when, for example, you're looking at a region, and we've done this for many, where there's one large city and maybe 3 or 4 other communities who are getting service. It can sort of be tougher to figure out how to allocate costs and how to put the pieces together, either for service sharing or for full-scale consolidation. So we lay this out for your two agencies. First of all, you each have a single EMS station, and you both have 2 ambulance crews at those stations. You can see them on this map, obviously contiguous service areas. Also important to note, and we're going to get into this, but per your chief and per Chief Russell at WAEMS, really where you are facing some of the biggest challenges in terms of response times and in terms of increasing call volumes, also the contiguous area there. So the northeast portion of your service area and the southeast portion of the WAEMS service area are facing some particular challenges. Next slide. In terms of staffing, similar staffing levels for the Waunakee area EMS. They are actually adding 2 paramedics, 1 this year and 1 in 2026. So you will be within 1 position of each other. One other distinction here is that they have a deputy chief. You do not. Your agency, because it is located within the city of Middleton government, some of the back office services are provided by city government. That is not the case with WAEMS, because they are an independent agency. So hypothetically speaking, that's one justification for their deputy chief. But certainly, as your staffing has grown, as the responsibilities that Chief Wunsch has encountered have grown, he's doing a lot of administrative work. And so that's something for you to consider going forward, the fact that you don't have a deputy chief to handle some of that work, as well as the work that is not being handled by your city government. Next slide. Also worth noting, you don't have to go back, but while both of you have moved to full-time staffing models, there is still some reliance on part-time staff, essentially to fill gaps when needed for vacation and time off of full-time personnel, etc. When we look at calls for service, and so here's where, again, some specific problems. WAEMS has seen its call volumes grow by about 44% over the 2017 to 2024 timeframe. That's a lot of growth. That's due not only to increasing population and development, but as I said earlier, as the populations of these communities age, that lends itself to more demand for 911 emergency medical services. We can go to the next slide. You have seen even more rapid growth in your call volumes over this period of time. And that 2024 number is it's important to look at. Typically, there's no hard and fast rule of when a community should consider adding an ambulance. But as you edge up closer to that 3,000 annual call level, really it starts to suggest that that's something that you need to seriously think about. And again, I know that this discussion has already been initiated. Next slide. Finally, just response times. This is a tough one because there are lots of factors that go into response times. What we did was simply looked at the last 3 years. This is showing you Waunakee area. Here on paper, it looks like certainly some cause for some concern. The percentage of calls in which the response is 6 minutes or less fell considerably between 23 and 24. The number of calls 10 minutes or more rose somewhat considerably. There were some extenuating factors here. There was one very high volume caller who lived near the station in Waunakee in 2023 and did not live there in 2024. That had something to do with it. Also, Waunakee has been sort of changing its policy on the use of sirens and lights, depending on the type of response. But again, this is something we looked at. It's in the report. We can look at yours in the next slide. I'm sorry, this slide is just showing you the particular challenge they face in terms of their response times to the town of Westport. Now we can go to the Middleton slide. As we can see, not as much of a difference in your response times over this 3-year period, but still a little bit of a fall off in terms of 6 minutes or less responses in 2024, and a little bit of an increase in terms of responses of 10 minutes or more in that same year. Next slide. We looked at budgets. What was striking to us in so many of the communities where we are asked to come in and do these studies, the problem is, how in the world are we going to possibly afford to make that conversion from part-time staffing to either a mix of part-time and full-time or a full-time staffing model? Oftentimes there are issues with property tax levy limits and lots of other issues. What is striking to us is that both your community and the Waunakee Area EMS Agency have really bitten the bullet and have had to come up with the dollars as you have converted to that full-time staffing, as both of you have said, look, we need to have 24/7 staffing of 2 ambulances. So this shows you the extent to which WAEMS's budget grew between 2019 and 2024. They really moved to full-time 24/7 staffing of their second ambulance during this period. We can now go to the next slide. We are not seeing as pronounced an increase in this 6-year period for you, because you really started to move toward 24/7 staffing of a second ambulance much earlier than this. But still, I know I don't have to tell you because you're the ones who had to find the resources, but you have seen your EMS budgets growing by necessity. Next slide. So when we think about what all of these data points tell us, and I didn't do justice to all of the data points in the report, but just showing you here a few of the takeaways, many of these obvious to all of you. Clearly, both service areas are growing in terms of both population and development. Your call volumes have escalated. Your response times may merit improvement. Both of you have already added staff at significant cost. The question is, for how much longer can you continue to do that? And at what point are you going to have to really, again, escalate your expenditures in order to add either an ambulance crew and or a new station? The good news in terms of looking at the possibility of collaboration here is that it's the contiguous sections of your respective service areas that arguably are most in need of additional capacity. So again, a question based on that is, would collaboration with your neighbor produce both greater efficiency and lower your combined costs? I don't think there's any question that both of you are going to have to, in order to meet this increasing service demand, look at spending more money. The key question is, could the new money that you will need to spend, could that amount be reduced if you acted in collaboration with WAEMS as compared to whether if you were to go it alone? So we can move to the next slide. To try to answer that question, we consulted with the 2 chiefs, we looked at the data, and we essentially decided to model 5 options just to give you food for thought. All of these are hypothetical options. For each of them, we have crunched numbers based on a bunch of assumptions that are laid out in the report that are hypothetical. We think that our fiscal analysis is certainly accurate enough to give you some very solid insights to be able to compare the options, but do not take these numbers to the bank. Again, these are all very hypothetical. What's important is the composition of the options and your ability to compare them based on the analysis that we did. There are other options out there, but I think this gives you a good framework for thinking about not only where you might want to go independently, but where there may be opportunity for you to work with WAEMS to potentially produce better efficiency, better service levels at a lower combined cost than if each of you acted individually. So the first one is really a status quo model. It's an assumption that you won't collaborate, that each of you will deal with your capacity, demand as you see fit and act independently. And we thought it was very important to model that, not only because, hey, maybe that's just the path you're going to go down, but also to give you an ability to compare that option with some of the collaboration options. For options 2 and 3, we hypothetically assume a new station is added. For option 2, we take a look at, and so that new station would be, and we'll show it to you in a map in just a moment, it would be basically in the northeast part of your service area, very hypothetical. We did not scout out a location, but it would be able to well serve the town of Westport and the southeast portion of WAEMS's service area and the northeast section of your service area. Under option 2, we assume that you share a new station, but that you each staff your own ambulance crew out of that station. For option 3, we assume that you share that station and there's just a single ambulance crew stationed there that you share. So you essentially knock down your current boundaries and have that station serve both of your service areas. Then options 4 and 5, we envision a consolidated agency. What if you decide that instead of sharing a station and possibly an ambulance crew, you instead want to pursue a merger of the two agencies, and so you completely knock down municipal boundaries and just station your stations where they most make sense to serve the overall service area. So I'm going to just very quickly run you through these 5 options. We can go to the next slide. First of all, based on call volumes and the rate at which they are increasing, the assumption is that the primary need for Waunakee area EMS is to move one of its 2 existing ambulance crews to a station in closer proximity to Westport to provide better service to that part of the district. But at this point in time, it doesn't mean they're not going to need to consider a 3rd ambulance in the relatively near future. But at this point in time, the assumption is that they can still get by with 2 crews, but optimally, they should have a 2nd station. For you, hypothetically, we're assuming that a 2nd station would be added as well as a 3rd ambulance crew based on your higher call volumes. And so in costing that out, the first step was to cost out what it would, what the expenditure level would need to be to add another full-time 24/7 ambulance crew. We assume you'd need 8 paramedics. You need more than 6 because you need to cover for time off. Even with that coverage, you'd still need to budget for some overtime. We assume that if you're going to add a 3rd ambulance and 8 more paramedics, that you do have to then add the deputy chief to take that administrative burden a little bit off the chief. So we've added that, and you can see some additional money for uniforms and training. So about $1.2 million is our estimate for the cost for a 3rd Middleton EMS ambulance. Next slide. So under the option in which each of you would build a 2nd station, all the details are in the report. We amortize the new station cost. We came up with a rough estimate, $600,000 for a single ambulance crew station or a single ambulance station, $8 million for a station that could house 2 ambulances. And so we amortize that cost over 10 years. We put in a bonding level. I don't need to get into the details. But when you think about what it would cost to add a station, well, if you're adding a crew, we have that $1.2 million personnel cost. We have the cost of just operating a station, equipping it, paying for utilities, et cetera. We have that station construction cost amortized out over 10 years. We have the cost for you of purchasing that third ambulance. And so you can see the cost of option one, if you were each to go it alone and each build a station, there'd be a considerable annual capital cost for the Wanakee area EMS. But for you, it would be both a substantial personnel cost and a substantial station cost, as well as the amortization of the purchase of a new ambulance. Next slide. For options 2 and 3, again, here's on the map where we would put the hypothetical new station. So for each of these options, the assumption is that the two communities cooperate and split the cost of a new station. In option 2, you're each operating your own crew out of that station, and in option 3, you're sharing a crew. So we can go to option 2. In option 2, you still have that added personnel cost. WAEMS does not, because again, they're just moving their existing second ambulance. The cost of the station is more expensive because it's a larger station that would need to house 2 ambulances, but because you're splitting it, you would see a savings when compared to option 1, as would they. Next slide. For option 3, again, this one envisions that you would build a station to house 1 ambulance in that location, and you would essentially, instead of each of you having a crew there would be 1 crew. So essentially, they would add a half a crew. They would keep then their 2 ambulances at their existing station, and you, instead of adding a full 3rd crew, would essentially add a half a crew, because you're splitting that ambulance among your service areas. So you would both get some additional capacity. A key question for you would be, is that sufficient to appropriately serve your growing call volume, or would that just be a Band-Aid for a couple of years and you still are really going to need that third full-time ambulance all to yourself? For them, the calculus is, well, do we really need to add capacity at this point? Should we spend that money, or should we just do option 2 and move one of our crews to a new station? For hypothetical purposes, we assume here that the cost would be split 53 to 47. That was based on 2023 call volumes. You could, again, you'd have to have a negotiation about how to split that personnel cost. We assume that it would be housed with Middleton EMS. You'd have to negotiate that. However, here we just hypothetically lay out that cost. Again, considerable savings for you here, because you're now splitting the cost of that 3rd ambulance crew with WAEMS. But not to repeat myself, the question is, does that give you the added capacity that you need? Next slide. And I'm almost done. For options 4 and 5, we say, what if? What if instead of sharing a station and a crew, you decided to create 1 large EMS agency? For option 4, we assume you would build 2 new stations. That the problem, again, if you were 1 agency, if municipal boundaries were not an issue, if you had a larger staff to strategically deploy, and if you could put 4 stations in this larger geographic area where the call volumes really justify them, the thinking is you might be able to get by with your existing 4 ambulances. Next slide. We sort of create a hypothetical org chart. Well, what would a consolidated agency look like? We assume for option 4 that the same number of paramedics, because you have the same 4 ambulances, would be sufficient. We have a chief, we have a deputy chief, and we've added 2 administrative staff because it's a larger agency and it would hypothetically be an independent agency. That doesn't have to happen. It could be housed in one of your 2 governments, but that's what we assume. We assume you would still make some use of part-time staff under this option. So this shows you the staffing. Next slide. The estimated cost here would be a lower combined cost than any of the previous options. And again, this would need to be split in some way after a negotiation between the 2 of you. But really, you're just adding 1 station. You're adding 2 stations here, but you're really not adding much in terms of personnel because you're using the same 4 ambulances and the same number of paramedics. And then finally, we have option 5. Next slide. This one assumes that it's a consolidated agency and you only add 1 new station at the location that we showed for options 2 and 3. And you do add a 5th ambulance crew. So there are 5 ambulance crews serving the larger geographical area. This shows you that there would be a lower capital cost because you're only adding 1 station instead of 2, but a higher personnel cost and a higher overall cost. Next slide. So this is the summary of the 5 options. You can see that all of the collaboration and service sharing options would be less expensive than option 1, where each agency acts independently. Again, that doesn't mean that any of these options are still the way to go. There are basically pros and cons to each of them. Finally, in our last slide. So again, not to repeat myself, the conclusion, it looks pretty unavoidable that both agencies are going to see further growth in expenses in the future. And we think this exercise has shown that sharing a new station and or a new crew would reduce that combined cost, and fully consolidated could reduce it even further. As I've said, you would need to determine as you look at these options, if a shared 3rd ambulance would provide sufficient additional capacity. They would need to determine whether they need to pay for any additional capacity at this time. We would argue to you that consolidation has many benefits in terms of increased efficiency and administrative staffing and lowering overtime costs because you have a larger staff to strategically deploy. It can help you in retention and recruitment because you're better able to build career ladders. So it's in the report. There's benefits to consolidation. There's also drawbacks. The foremost drawback is you'd have to create a governance structure where each of you would lose complete local control over your EMS staffing and budgeting. And finally, again, not to try to point you in any specific direction, but we want to suggest that perhaps a phased approach would be most viable, that starting by thinking about how you might share a new station and maybe a new crew, putting that into place, seeing how it works, and then considering a full merger as even more additional capacity is deemed necessary. So I will conclude there. I would be happy to answer any questions. My sense is that the chief may be better able to answer some of the questions you'll be asking.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate that. That was a very good overview. Now, it strikes me that maybe it's Alder Schaefer who's on the EMS, or was that you last year? All right.
It was, but
It's fine. It's fine. So I'm just looking at you that maybe in the future, if you're still on it, we can have future discussions as part of the EMS team. And I know that our new chief, whoever that may be, will be able to bring that to fruition. So I get that, you know, you're laying the foundation for us on this perspective. And I'm really glad that you introed Rob and his presentation. So talk to me a little bit, and then we'll see if the council has some thoughts. And if the council doesn't have thoughts tonight, but would like to think about it later, they can always speak to Alder Schaefer, who may be a point person over the next year. And I think there was a comment, but I'm going to let him talk, and then we'll switch back to Alder Henaro. So
I think the number one takeaway tonight is obviously this is an introduction of the product of the study itself. There certainly is a lot of information in there, a lot that you need to digest. I don't think anyone's looking for, at this point, any quick answers or trying to align with any one of those options out there. It's really the
there was a
early
lot.
stages.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah.
And so I would encourage each of you to take some time to, really go through that. I think the next logical step is there's a number of stakeholders, not any other municipal partners, elected officials, boards, commissions, and all those individuals who are really going to need to, kind of sit down and discuss openly a lot of the ideas, options, and see, those pros and cons. Ultimately, after probably a lot of, work and planning, the, I think obvious solution will, come to fruition. It's just not something that's going to be an easy, with minimal effort. But we clearly don't have an option of doing nothing. We know our community is growing. You know very well as I do, even the population and composition of our city is changing in many ways. We've seen, and I mentioned this to some of you individually, every time we bring in another senior living community, or any sort of apartment complexes, which is, dense population growth, it's an automatic, increase in call volumes. And you can only do so much of that before you get to the point of, okay, we've reached another threshold. And when it comes to staffing, equipment, locations, it's all about service delivery. That's our obligation. That's how we measure our performance. It's not only, response time, but, what we can do to actually, provide good care. And as the population ages, which is also mentioned in the report, it's our responsibility to make sure that we plan accordingly for it and don't go into crisis mode. We've been trying to lay the groundwork and let everyone be aware of what the future portends. With that, I think the action tonight is more or less to at least acknowledge acceptance of the report. And then outside of this, we can start strategizing on what the next steps would be and how we can sit down with the partners to discuss all the options.
And then we'll circle back to Alder Hanairo.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The question and comment, of course, you're right about the apartments. I think right now in the next 4 to 5 years, we're looking at probably close to 2,000 new apartments in the city. So we're going up fast. And so my question was, I look at 2,700 calls. That's about 4 to 5 calls for every crew, every single shift. Is that correct?
Yeah, and actually, and those numbers in there were actually concentrated on the ones that occurred in our districts, as well as, and there are some other calls that weren't counted in there that were, for instance, fire standby calls. They still consume our services and responses, but I mean, those are actual patients that we take care of. But
That's a lot then.
it is, and I'll keep saying it. Okay, we talked about my ensuing retirement here, but I came here in 1994, and when it was an all volunteer operation, our call volumes then were less than 400 calls per year. So here we are, 30 years later, and it's 8, 9 times that amount, and that trend will continue. And this is not unique to Middleton. I can tell you all of our, partners in Dane County are experiencing the exact same thing. I don't care if it's Verona, if it's Fitchburg, if it's Sun Prairie, you name it. It's the same story. Some of the things that are talked about here as options, we have seen in other areas of the county have already begun. For instance, Marshall EMS outside Sun Prairie. They essentially couldn't operate their EMS service anymore. So the city of Sun Prairie took it over. They merged the 2 districts, right? There's other areas, smaller communities that were, had their services absorbed. Sherwood Hills doesn't do EMS. Madison does it for them. Examples like that. So this is the trend in EMS. It's how it's going. As he said there, we know that there will be more resources required. Don't ever get the idea that even collaboration is going to save you money. It's what we call cost avoidance. As one of the options is, we can go it alone, do a lot of duplication in planning for it, or we can try to be more efficient about it and do some cost avoidance. That is really the mindset that you have to have when looking at these things.
I'm glad you guys.
Conversation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because it strikes me that although our call volume is growing every year, for the most part, our EMS has kept pace in the time volume, where Wanakee is also growing, and that's a little bit where they're struggling. And that's not to say they do anything wrong. It's just that they might need that cooperative spirit to help them with the call, because maybe it's the geography that they struggle with or where their population is. But it's very interesting things. I look forward to that discussion, and I appreciate that. Alder Hanairo.
Thank you. I have a few questions for you, Chief, and for Rob. We'll start with you, Chief. So what is your ideal time frame? I know you're retiring, but what would you say is a good time frame for doing the strategizing and the city making a decision with our, presumable partners in Wanakee on which of these options to pursue?
So let me just start by one thing. This is actually kind of an interesting way of how prior plans have played out. When we actually built our stations, the fire station and the EMS station, there was a service study done at that time. And believe it or not, it quite accurately predicted that by 2025, we were going to be needing to have another station and another crew added.
Wow.
Pretty amazing how that worked out. So that's why if you've seen in the capital projects out there, that groundwork has been laid. There's been some placeholders in there, knowing this was coming. So, as far as the timetable out here, I would say no later than 2028, can you sit pat we will have to do something no later than then. Ideally, a year or two before that would be, ideal. But as these things go, sometimes they'll go smooth as butter and we can accomplish a lot in a short period of time. Then again, there may be some fits and starts in there.
Okay. Second question. So you mentioned apartments, and I just have to ask, so there are about 2,000 new housing units going up in my district alone, and it'll extend from Pheasant Branch Road all the way to Parmenter. So and it's not all houses, but would 2,000 new houses be expected to present less of a burden in terms of service calls and travel time to get to those places than 2,000 apartments clustered in, 10 buildings?
Without getting into, a lot of intense demographic studies and that, I will say this: single family homes generally with younger families don't produce as many calls. Generally, multifamily unit housing out there has a higher percentage of older residents living there and or can bring in populations that just by their very nature can demand more services. And we know one of the things out there is access to healthcare out there. Fortunately, sometimes people without, insurance coverage in that will use EMS as their primary healthcare option. In other words, rather than, being able to access primary care through a normal clinic setting, their answer is, if I have a problem, I call 911, take me to the emergency room. So there's a lot of demographics behind that, but we know in general, those senior living facilities and apartment complexes do have a higher percentage of actual call generations than single family housing.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I think it's, in my opinion, neither of those. I mean, I certainly don't want to have a preference for not allowing senior housing to be developed. I think that's important to remember. Question for Rob. The dates, the ranges for population, you looked at from 2014 to 2023, for equalized property value from 2015 to 2023, and calls for service from 2017 to 2024. Why not use the same range of years?
Basically the short answer is the data sources. And needing to do apples to apples. And so ideally we would have shown 10-year snapshots for each, but there are a few different reasons why it just made sense to start a little later. I didn't collect the data. One of our other researchers did. I can't remember why he couldn't get the accurate apples to apples equalized data value comparison for 2014, had to use 15. Chief, I'm not sure. I can't remember why we started with 2017 call volume data. I think it may have been that's what we could get from dispatch or an IT system turned over. But I think it was a reason like that. There was no science behind the different ranges.
Yeah, I can just quickly say that, we have been collecting our statistics consistently for many, many, many years. One of the things that we do have in Dane County is a very good integrated system through Dane County where all the EMS providers out there have gotten onto the same patient care reporting system out there. So the data from that, as far back as that goes to about 2017, is far more reliable. Some of that data before that, when people were on disparate systems out there, you weren't necessarily collecting the same information, and it was probably not fair to necessarily go pull some numbers that weren't, assured to be exactly the same data collection on the same basis. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Rob, was there any consideration of the state innovation grants? Would any of these options make the cities, or the city, the village eligible to receive an innovation grant from the state? And would that help to defray some of the costs?
So the innovation grants typically help you with the planning. And so you would not have been eligible for an innovation grant to help pay for this study because they're limited to communities of population of 5,000 or under. Another thing with so I think the innovation grants could potentially help you if you decided to merge your two departments and there were some various startup costs. I'm not an expert, but I think there could be some potential there. I know one of the problems we had from the get-go with the innovation grant idea, not that it wasn't a sound idea, but that in order to qualify for a grant, you had to be able to show that you were saving money. And as the chief put it, and as I explained it, this isn't about saving money budget to budget. It's about reducing what the added cost might have to be. So I just don't know enough to know whether you would be qualified. I think if you decide to merge, it would be a good idea to look at that. But I'm not sure that you would qualify.
Thank you. I see Bill Burns wants to add something.
Bill,
Yeah, just on that subject of the innovation grants, yeah, that was our understanding that we would not be eligible for the planning grants. For the innovation grants themselves, the way the legislation was written, the amount of the grant is available based on the amount of savings from the baseline. So it actually needs to be a net savings, not a cost avoidance. But several of the state associations have been making that comment and pointing out that this kind of situation is very common where costs are going to continue to go up, and the potential out there is for consolidation to limit the increase of those costs. So we are hopeful that there will be some follow-up in either the rulemaking or potential follow-up legislation. But as written today, it would not be available for this scenario, but something we'll keep an eye on.
Great, thank you.
Alder Nelson.
Thank you. I'm not sure who this question should be for, but I will ask. Other communities have obviously successfully merged crews. And I'm just wondering if there's a standard procedure governmentally to follow, or are we forging our own path on this one?
Absolutely not. I can tell you the trend in this county, the state, the nation has been to pursue these types of collaborative things. It's simply because, as you're well aware, financing of all government operations, and particularly in a healthcare environment out there, is becoming more and more challenging. It is an ever increasing demand for service, ever decreasing amount of resources out there. So communities are finding themselves with few other options but to consider things like this. Now, how you go about doing that can be very different depending upon the players in the actual arena. And I think ultimately, before I even came here, I came from a county where the service I ran was a hospital-based service, and we provided communities. If I remember the count, it was 4 villages, 7 townships, and 3 cities.
Wow.
And the good news about that is all of that was coordinated, under a single contract. But the good news was every one of those municipalities, their number one concern was, are we getting good service? They did not try to micromanage the operations. All they measured their satisfaction was there good service being related? I think the challenges come in when governmental bodies try to get too deep into the weeds, managing operations and service delivery, as opposed to trusting the organization that they have either contracted with or own and operate to do the right thing based on their professional expertise to actually deliver superior service. So if we can get down, that, right-hand side where, all the municipal partners can trust that whatever gets, created or as a result of this study out there, are their citizens getting good service? If
Mhm.
that can be answered with a strong affirmative, it's a win.
I like that. I really do. It's a very
Yeah.
difficult thing. so-
That said, I'm sure there's a standard or we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like you at least would have the first few steps that we could follow somebody else's plan.
And one thing we are really fortunate in Dane County is we have a very strong EMS system across the entire county. We work together, we are tightly integrated. And once again, keeping that in the forefront out there, I had every confidence whatsoever that we can do a stellar job of continuing that tradition.
Great, thanks.
All right.
I would
Robust
like to move
discussion.
That we acknowledge the report or accept it, whatever the proper motion should
Be a motion to accept the report.
Motion to accept the report.
Most excellent. Is there a second?
Alder Crow, I'll second.
Hey, any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving or of accepting of the report, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Rob, thank you too.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I would like to pull items 9 and 10. And then,
I'm sorry, I was actually, I'm not trying to stop you. I did, were you going to make a motion? You're
Covered it.
deferring?
I was
Okay,
gonna
great.
say-
9 and 10, go ahead, Alder Haniro.
and then I would like to clarify that items 7 and 8 are pending city attorney review and approval of any associated contracts. And with that change, I would like to move approval of consent agenda items 1 through 8.
Is there a second? I'm looking to you now.
Carlos for a second.
Thanks, since you guys were at the same time. All right, any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda items 1 through 8, noting that 7 and 8 is pending city attorney approval. I think there was additional.
Of any associated contracts?
Thank you so much. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to number 9 of the consent agenda. Unless
I
you're
would
looking to
like to-
package 9 and 10, I'm sorry.
No, we'll do them separately, but
Okay,
I
great.
need Brian's help for this because he's got the lengthy motion that came from PRFC. And Brian, I don't know if your version adds pending council approval of resolution 2025-16, but
It does.
okay, great. So
Yeah, so the recommended motion coming out of Finance Committee would be threefold. So it'd be approval of award of bid to PCC Sports for Lakeview Tennis and Pickleball Court reconstruction in amount not to exceed $802,719.89. Contingent on the approval of resolution 2025-16, which is later in tonight's agenda. 2, subject to the city attorney's review and approval of any associated contract. And 3, award of contract to this company, but based upon the person or the Park and Recreation Committee's recommendation that the item be approved with the base bid plus the additional item of privacy slats, contingent upon staff working with the contractor to remove item number 45, the 24-foot tennis bounding board, and replace with an equivalent length of black vinyl chain link fencing.
that is the motion I make.
And Lorman will second.
Any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving consent agenda item number 9, award of bid to PCC Sports for the Lakeview Tennis and Pickleball Court reconstruction in an amount not to exceed $802,719.89, contingent on approval of city attorney approvals with some additional language, items number 2 and 3, which I will let us all recall. Please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1. And moving on to item number 10, consent agenda number 10, approval of quote from Turf Hound for practice range mats at Pleasant View Golf Course in an amount not to exceed $28,728. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'm going to move approval of the quote, even though I'm not going to vote for it, but I feel like as the Chair of Finance and Personnel, I should bring this forward, even though it was a 2-1 vote against.
Lorman will second that.
Okay, any comments?
Just to clarify, the reason I'm voting against this is because we cannot confirm that the Turf Hound products don't contain PFAS, and that was something that was very important to me when we were considering the school district's desire to install artificial turf at the ball fields at Middleton High School. And so as a matter of principle, I feel I need to be consistent and not vote for PFAS containing products to be installed. Or
Okay.
I should say potentially PFAS containing products.
Understood. Any other comments? Alder Lorman and then Alder Jackson, please.
Sure, and I would add that it was my two colleagues on the Finance Commission that voted no. And my only reason for voting yes was just after hearing from the manager of the golf course, I just got the impression that this material, he acknowledged that, yeah, it's artificial material, it's not ideal, but the goal is, long range, to try to do something different that would be more environmentally friendly. And my thinking was just more of the expediency. It's part of a larger project. They don't seem to have any other options, and I just didn't want to get in the way of micromanaging it, and that was it.
All right, thanks for that perspective, Alder Jackson.
Piggybacking with what Alder Lorman said, after he spoke, I was in favor of approving it, but my concern also piggybacking off of Alder Hanaro was the PFAS concern. That's why I voted no.
Okay. Any other comments?
And I guess my question would be what are the alternatives?
Maybe I'll ask Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy. Can you maybe give us a 1-minute summary? Because I may have missed that portion of the discussion from your perspective.
Sure. So we currently hit our practice range where it's about a $300,000 revenue generating operation at Pleasant View Golf Course, and is, in my opinion, vital for the operation for a number of reasons, which I can go into if needed. But we decided about 5 years ago to move from a grass hitting surface to an artificial hitting surface, mainly because of the safety concerns that we had with some of the adjacent holes due to the length in which golfers are hitting golf balls. We are currently, award of bid is one of the items that you all have hopefully approved on, to put fencing in some of those areas to alleviate some of those safety concerns. However, it still does not contain all the golf balls. In 5 years, the USGA, which is a governing body of golf balls, if you want to think of it that way, is looking at rolling back the how much a ball can flight or be in the air, about roughly 10%. It's not approved fully, but if that does get approved, then we feel like we can start moving back to a grass hitting solution. But right now, the only option would be hitting off of an artificial turf which is mainly consisted of rubber, nylon, and PP materials. There is no other eco biodegradable solution on the market at this time, unfortunately. What we currently have in place is a system called Turf Hound. It is, I would argue, the best system available for golfers for artificial mats. Some of the most renowned golf courses in the country use it. I'm not saying that's the reason why we are doing it, but the reason why we went with it was testimonials and then also the 5-year success that we had with it. And so this is just a specific replacement of the fairway panels of this range system and not the entire system like we did 5 years ago.
Okay, Alder Kalish?
Have we specifically asked any of these manufacturers if there are alternatives that don't have PFAS?
Again, I can't confirm if they do or do not. I just know that it's made of nylon and PP polyethylene or whatever it is.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, just point of information. From Turf Hound's website, it does say that's a unique urethane-based blend. It doesn't make any reference to PFAS-related materials, nor is it necessarily that the PFAS is utilized in the construction of urethane-related products.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Brian. Jeremy, sometimes we get so focused and it's very important to council, but I do appreciate you answering these questions. And I know it's important to you guys as well as golfers. And one thing I want to circle back on is if we are trying to make things safer because we don't want the balls in flight, it's my understanding.
Yeah, specifically on hole 3 of the Lake Golf Course. Yep.
Yeah, that it sounds like this is being considered so that there are additional risks in the system. You know, we try so much to protect things, but in doing that, we may be creating other problems. And so it sounds like you're trying to resolve a different problem.
100%.
So
yeah, and believe
I do
me, as
appreciate
me as a golfer, we do not want to hit off of artificial turf. We want to hit off grass.
Yeah.
I can tell you that this is not a decision that we made lightly. It was solely out of safety.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a real quick one, Jeremy. What is the, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this yesterday, what's the expected kind of life cycle of those mats?
4 to 5 years.
Okay.
We are so, now that varies based on facility, but we are such a high volume facility that we're going to get 4 to 5 years at most out of this.
And
Thank you.
a great question. I appreciate that, Alder Madden, because maybe in that time, either the golf ball distance.
Can't guarantee it, but
Can't guarantee
yep.
it, but in the interim, going back to Alder Kalish's point, it could be that maybe there's a substitute, or we could take that time to find a resolution in that 5-year turnover.
Fair. And then I think another point to maybe consider in terms of environmental, remember with us not being on turf, we're not watering that turf and we're not putting any, like fertilizer or any chemicals of any sort in the turf that we would have otherwise used. So not saying that that's makes up for anything else, but.
And that's an interesting perspective. And then also remember, one of the concerns we had about the other location, because I know I'm supposed to stay focused, but I just want to try and help the conversation, is that was very close to the creek. I know you're still part of the ecosystem, but you don't have a creek right there. So like next to.
Talk about the Black Creek, I'm sorry.
The Conservancy. The school is like literally next to, like 10 feet from the water source.
Oh, fair. Got it. Okay. Different. Yep.
Different geographic
I understand. Sorry,
turf
I was
right
thinking
into
more
the
location.
water. It's okay. You weren't there for that
That's
very
great.
long discussion. And so even though it's very critical, and I do care about our environment and I respect you for your thought process and trying to parallel it, for council, please keep in mind that this is not literally running right into that creek 10 feet away. Moving on to that, is there any other final comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda item number 10, approval of quote from Turf Hound for practice range mats at Pleasant View Golf Course in an amount not to exceed $28,728. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, I think that's a 5-3. Is that fair, Brian? Okay, approved.
Thank you, guys.
All right, moving on to ordinances. First reading, number 1, an ordinance to amend section 1.01 of the Middleton General Ordinances to change the start time for common council meetings. Is there a motion?
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of suspending the rules for ordinance number 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Returning to the ordinance, is there a motion?
Schaefer will move.
Okay. Is there a second?
No.
Nairo will second.
Go ahead.
Any comments?
I'll
I,
try not to be late.
I have a question just about the effective date of the change.
Effective at the next council meeting.
Okay.
We'd start at 7 p.m. the next council meeting.
And is
So-
that going to be on the 2nd? Is that correct? Wednesday?
Uh,
Is the election then?
No, because the council has not taken previous action to move the meeting. I mean, that's,
No, but I mean, yeah.
We
It's
we
not
don't,
related to the motion. It's just, is our next meeting going to be on Wednesday the 2nd?
no, it would be Tuesday the 1st because the council hasn't taken previous action to move that
Okay,
date.
So there's no elections planned.
Not in this building, no.
Okay, so all those in favor of approving an ordinance to amend section 1.01 of the Middleton General Ordinances to change the start time for common council meetings, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to number 2, an ordinance to amend sections 21.012G and 21.022G of the Middleton General Ordinances regarding city vehicles and parks and conservancies. Is there a motion?
This is Madden. I'll move approval to, oops, sorry, my glasses, to amend the sections 21.01 and 21.02 of the Middleton General Ordinances regarding city vehicles and parks and conservancies.
Is there a second?
Nelson will second.
Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the ordinance to amend sections 21.01 and 21.02 of Middleton General Ordinances regarding city vehicles and parks and conservancies, please say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And an ordinance to amend sections 2.05 of the Middleton General Ordinance to change Water Resources Management and Stormwater Utility Commission, WRMS, WUC to Water Resources Management Commission, or WRMC. Is there a motion?
This is Nairo. I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of suspending the rules for ordinance number 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving back to the ordinance, is there a motion?
This is Nairo. I move to approve the ordinance to amend section 2.05 to change Wormswuck to WRMC.
Is there a second?
Schaefer will second.
Any comments? Also, we appreciate simpler acronyms. Much appreciated. Okay, all those in favor of ordinance number 3, an ordinance to amend Middleton General Ordinance to change WRMS, WUC to WRMC, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion passes unanimously. And item number 4, an ordinance to amend section 26 of the Middleton General Ordinances related to stormwater regulations relating to fee in lieu requirements. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I have a question for the city attorney. Is it recommended to suspend the rules and go to the second reading, or what would your recommendation be?
I don't think we're that level of urgency.
Okay.
Erica,
Perhaps, Eric, can you just come to the front and give us a minute overview?
Well, I'm ready to move approval of the first reading. I just wanted to find out if this was something that, like the other two where I suspended or asked to suspend the rules, they were like simple changes, but I didn't know if there was a legal reason to go.
no,
Okay.
I don't.
All right, then I move to accept the recommendation of our city attorney, our stormwater engineer, and the WRMC and adopt the proposed changes to chapter 26 of the Middleton Municipal Code.
This is Madden, I'll second.
Any comments?
I'd like to hear from
Mhm.
our stormwater engineer and our city attorney, please.
Well, I'll just make a simple statement. Fees in lieu is commonly misunderstood to be some kind of an exchange or a way to ease requirements on developments, and that's not the case. This fees in lieu does not involve a relaxation of performance standards. It's a separate layer that's kind of a separate above the standard performance requirements. The language that's being proposed doesn't change that. We'd still be working with the same performance requirements. So from a technical standpoint, this is not really an issue.
I appreciate that insights. Thank you for.
Yeah, and I'll
sharing.
take any questions, but this gets kind of into the weeds pretty fast. I sent you all a lengthy response to lengthy questions and comments from Alder Kalish, and some of that becomes moot if we just understand that this is not a relaxation of standards.
Okay, and then following.
Well, I think the other thing, important thing to understand is, there's this sense that, we don't know what the ramifications of this is or would be, but nothing could be further from the truth, because what these changes represent is to have our ordinance language get more in line with the way this ordinance has actually been implemented the entire time. Now, I understand that I misspoke to some degree when I said that some of the peak flow and everything, that we never used fees in lieu for that. That is not true, but I do understand that at least going back to 2017, that is true, that we don't do that, and that's because Dane County will no longer allow that. And in that circumstance, maybe at one time was a little bit of a relaxation, but we no longer allow any sort of relaxation in these other standards. The biggest problem is that because of a particular development, it was pointed out there's language that arguably, and I'll not go into all the different ways this can be interpreted, but it arguably requires that if you've got a site that does not infiltrate or cannot because of prohibitions in our ordinance, and that's the way even state statute is set up, that there's some places you don't want to infiltrate, that you can't infiltrate, and certain limitations about how much you can require a site to dedicate to infiltration. And once those are met, the state statute requires that they say, okay, you have done what you are required to do. And you are allowed to get approval. The way our ordinance is worded, it seems to suggest that that still those prohibitions and the things that statute will allow you to go forward with aren't good enough, and that you not only have to pay some fees in lieu, but in order to be allowed to do that, you also must provide infiltration downstream. And that's the real problem that we're dealing with. What does that mean in this context? Because first of all, most properties, you cannot provide downstream infiltration because most properties will, once the stormwater leaves the site, will go into stormwater drainage facilities, which are largely concrete, metal, and so there are no more infiltration possibilities. Also, most people, they own their site. They don't own downstream land to also create additional stormwater facilities. They don't have the ability to use eminent domain to acquire that property. So in most circumstances, what this interpretation of our ordinance, what the language is suggesting, is imposing a requirement that is an impossibility. And that is what we are really trying to avoid here. I think that interpretation and the way the ordinance reads would be contrary to statute. And if, you know, somebody were trying to force that interpretation upon us, we get caught between, as I've said at previous meetings, caught between either enforcing ordinance language that is contrary to what state law allows us to do, or disregarding our own ordinance language, and that is not a situation that is comfortable to be in. And so for all those reasons, that's why we are recommending this. And again, I want to reiterate that, you know, this is how the ordinance has been looked at and interpreted going back a very long time. And so this is not a new thing. This is something that popped up and got raised for the first time ever. And so, you know, this is the first time I've known that this language really exists and could possibly be interpreted this way. And that's why I'm strongly recommending that it be changed so that our practices that we've been actually using for many, many, many years align with our ordinance language and also align with state statute.
Alder Kalish.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to Eric, because I think all the alders have what I put together a few days ago, and Eric graciously responded to a lot of those, and that is a ton of work for city staff to do that. So thanks to city staff for their diligence and, you know, working on this issue, and all the committees that have reviewed it. So I'll try to be quick. So I've been a public servant for over 20 years in state and federal government. I have pursued hundreds and hundreds of rules and code that are very similar to ordinances. And it's incumbent upon public entities to thoroughly document reasoning, rationale, legal repercussions, short and long-term impacts of what we do, and place an ordinance that has impacts and legal repercussions on other people. And so you're going to hear me say this over and over again throughout the rest of my term. We really need to document this stuff, because I know, and Eric has had a lot of really, really thoughtful, great discussions at the Water Resource Committee. Others have had really good conversations, but it's our duty to put all of that into a spot in a location that's easy to find. All this discussion has happened at different committees. It's happened over email. It's happened over phone calls. We need to put things like this that have repercussions on other folks in an easily digestible location. So just that. But then one of my concerns with this is 2610-4B, where we delete the entire second half of that paragraph. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is the second sentence that we delete there: in order for the city to accept fees in lieu of. That is a critical sentence, because that gives general broad direction to developers, to cities. That's saying if fees in lieu of are going to be considered, these are going to be some things. And I understand that what's in there is very specific right now, and there's some concerns, there's some legal concerns. But my recommendation is that we have more discussion about this. I don't know if we've had really thorough discussion about alternatives to, instead of saying that exact language that we're concerned about legally, can we adjust that language to still make sure that we're acknowledging the importance of some of these issues and concerns, and we're giving potential developers an idea, if you're going to apply for fees in lieu of, these are some of the things that you're going to have to consider or may have to consider. That's one of my biggest things, you know, instead of getting rid of everything, have we talked about putting something in there and rewording it to address the legal issues and concerns?
Oh, everybody wants to talk over here.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Do we know which one's which?
We'll go Jackson and Hanaro.
Okay,
and
we're
then
working together on
Go
this
down
because
the
this is a
line.
hot
I don't mind
topic.
going cleanup.
Okay,
Alder Jackson, I'll follow you.
I just want to say,
thank
I
you.
support, my fellow Alder colleagues. Those are the same concerns that I had. I apologize on behalf of being the chair of the LNO that I missed the meeting, but the meetings I watched. And I noticed that when we had the meeting, there was a deep conversation, but both alders, there was no agreement on the action to take after that meeting, because I think there was some concerns. And also, one of the other concerns that I had is when I watched the WRMC meeting, there was a lot of questions, and there was questions that was left, even though it was voted 4-2, there was questions that was left on the table. There was unanswered questions. One of the concerns that I see that was unanswered question, I think was brought up, was a concern about what does this do to future projects? You know, what's the concern on the engineering part of it? There was just a lot of unanswered questions, and that was my concern. And I think he said it best, how all the colleges put it. I agree with him 100%. You know, I just feel that there needs to be more conversation.
Okay, and I think Alder Lorman and then Alder Haniro? Sure. Is that fair? Yeah, thank you.
Eric, this technical question for you, because I'm dumb and I need to understand one thing. So in summary, what we're saying right now is this water that infiltrates, after it leaves my property and goes somewhere else, it's still my problem, versus after it leaves my property and goes somewhere else, it may not be my problem.
I'm not sure.
Because I can't do anything about it.
Can you try to rephrase it?
That's kind of what I.
It sounds like if you have runoff and it goes onto the neighbor's property.
Is it
and
my
they
problem
blame
or is
you
it the
and say
neighbor's
it's
problem?
still-
Right.
Well, a downstream landowner is responsible to accept drainage from upstream. Like you can't dam up your neighbor. Groundwater, I would say, would be the same kind of rule. You know, and you're responsible to not discharge water onto your downstream neighbor in a way that's going to damage their property.
Okay.
Infiltration is a different animal than, say, peak rate control or water quality treatment.
Okay.
And it's because there are sites, well, there's two ways to look at this. Some sites have poor soils, which is very difficult to infiltrate within. And some sites have a land use that, you know, like a gas station, you don't necessarily want to infiltrate runoff from a gas station because there's a good chance you're going to be collecting a high level of pollutants with that. So the whole premise of constructing a downstream facility to infiltrate water from upstream is problematic when you don't know what all the upstream land uses are. As an example, Confluence Pond is built to handle rate control, you know, for that greater airport business park, not infiltration. Those lots are on their own to provide infiltration because it's possible there could be an industrial land use that we don't want to infiltrate water.
Okay. Yeah, and so that's why I just, you know, try to get a little synopsis of that and understand where, you know, it's getting in that, just that one clause of that Alder Kalish is essentially asking for, you know, more discussion, more clarification, not on that piece, but the, you know, fees in lieu or not kind of thing. So that's it. Thank you.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Eric, but maybe another way of answering your question is you're responsible for the water when it's on your property and
Yep.
making sure it's discharged properly. I mean, once it's off your property, you can't really control where it goes and what it does to the other property, but you still have the responsibility to take care of what water runs off. And that's part of, from what I understand, that's part of what Water Resource does when they're looking at development plans is where's this water gonna go? You take the big picture of where's this water gonna go? How are we gonna affect the flow from the property and require the developer to
Yeah.
take care of that before it leaves their property?
The whole point of stormwater management is to try to mimic pre-developed conditions so that there are as little downstream impacts as possible. You know, it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's constantly evolving.
Okay, Alder Guerrero.
I agree with my colleague. Is it Kalish or Kalish?
College.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with Alder Kalish about the documentation. I feel like, you know, I'm used to working within state and federal legislation where there is a legislative history provided, so you can go back and see why this changed. Our ordinance don't do that. I don't know of any ordinances that do. So I don't know how we would document something without a wholesale change to our ordinances. Maybe the License and Ordinance Committee can look into that in the future. I disagree that the sentence that was showing on the screen about the downstream facilities is critical. Since January of 2020, there have been 19 fee in lieu requests approved. There was no controversy and no dissent on any of those except the two related to the property at 2159 Allen Boulevard. The votes have always been unanimous. Nobody has ever invoked this language that's being struck or proposed to be struck until 2159 Allen. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but this is the property that has been the subject of a lot of conversation, both within the Plan Commission and the council and the comprehensive plan in the zoning code. This is what it looks like to have opponents digging in and trying to stop a development. It just needs, I need to say that. I disagree that the WRMC needs to have more discussion on this. We've gotten a strong recommendation from our city attorney and from our stormwater engineer. The message, in case folks haven't had a chance to read it, the message from Eric today says, the proposed ordinance change will have no effect on stormwater management performance standards or requirements. Site developments will have to meet the same requirements as they do currently. So I don't know how we can think that we don't know the impacts of this change when Eric says pretty clearly it's not going to have an impact on how he or his successor reviews stormwater management performance or stormwater management plans. He says the current ordinance language regarding a downstream facility to reach infiltration/recharge performance is technically nonsensical and infeasible. So again, I don't know how it can be said that we don't know what the effects will be. We know that this particular ordinance language doesn't make sense for infiltration and recharge. So I don't know what more the WRMC can discuss. It was a 4-2 vote. One of the members who voted against, which by the way, 4-2, it passed. It doesn't make it an illegitimate vote. One of the members who voted against is the member who has opposed the fees in lieu just for this site. In fact, after we discussed this particular ordinance change at our last WRMC meeting, like 2 agenda items later, we approved a fee in lieu request unanimously. So I think and also the member who voted against the fee in lieu request also spoke at the comprehensive plan public hearing that the Plan Commission had and opposed development at 2159 Allen Boulevard. So I I think we have a highly skilled and experienced stormwater engineer and the city attorney. They're recommending this change. WRMC recommended this change. Eric has gone above and beyond to explain what fees in lieu are and are not. Eric does an exceptional job reviewing stormwater management plans. And I trust both Matt and Eric to be making recommendations to us for the sole reason that it protects the city and puts the city in the best position possible. It has nothing to do with caving into developers. It has everything to do with doing their jobs, which we pay them to do. In Matt's case, to protect us from lawsuits, and in Eric's case, to make sure our ordinance does what it's intended to do, which is to minimize the impact of additional stormwater produced from urbanization and redevelopment. And that's what I have to say.
I do want to say to maybe a more direct answer to your question. In terms of, are there other things that we ought to let developers know that they have to meet in order to get fees in lieu? And I think that it goes back to Eric's initial comments. I think the question itself presumes something that is not true. That is that fees in lieu, particularly when it comes to infiltration, is somehow a favor to the developer. If the developer does X, Y, and Z, you get to pay fees in lieu. It's not the way it operates. It's actually an additional thing that they would have to do. That's what the feature of our ordinance as it applies to infiltration is, an added burden. It is not something that you know, they get out from under. They are still being forced to comply with the same performance standards that everyone else has to. And when I say everyone else, the infiltration standards are a uniform statewide standard. And those are the same standards that are getting applied here. So there are no other conditions we would ask a developer to meet, because like I said, it is not, they're not getting out from under anything. They're not being given a favor to pay the fees in lieu. And when it comes to infiltration, that is strictly a additional burden that we currently place upon them. So that is why I don't think discussion of any other conditions is appropriate.
Alder Kalish.
Yeah, and so, you know, so something like that could be described after the in order of, but then I think, and what I'm asking is just consideration. This is an extremely complex topic, extremely. I mean, there's not just state, there's county ordinances involved, there's state law involved, there's our ordinances involved. We have had significant comment from the public. We've had a lot of discussion about different alternatives and different, what are the impacts, what are the potential impacts of this at the Water Resources Committee. I really feel that this is a pretty significant issue, and it deserves thorough discussion. And I don't think that we have gotten to that thorough discussion yet. At the Water Resources Committee meeting, one of the members said, I hope this doesn't go to these meetings and just get approved, because this is a very meaty topic. And so, another issue that we haven't talked about are those other practices that are being removed from fee in lieu of. So it's, the peak discharge, runoff, sediment control, and then what was the third one? Temperature. And I think I understand that, the reason for that. I think one reason is that they haven't been considered for fees in lieu of, but then, I mean, the big question is that appropriate in the future as well? Just because they haven't in the past, development changes, practices changes, the environment changes. And then the other question is, I think the county doesn't allow it for those 4 practices. So that's the primary reason these are being removed. I guess so anyway, so that I think that there are still outstanding questions and comments. And in my opinion, a topic of this magnitude deserves additional consideration and discussion.
Thank you for sharing. Alder Nelson.
I apologize, Eric. a lot of this stuff is a lot more technical than I'm worthy of, but can you give me an example of when a developer would not pay a fee in lieu and another example of when they would?
Since I've been here and for several years prior that I looked at some point for a different reason, we've only used fees in lieu for infiltration and recharge. The other requirements, you meet them on site. I'm going to go back to what I originally said. For these sites with poor soils, or if it was an industrial site that we don't want to infiltrate, that is meeting requirements. I've had this exact conversation with Jeremy Belusik, who's head of Dane County Water Resources Engineering. He agrees completely. They are meeting the requirements. Our ordinance phrases it as prohibitions. There's a whole page of prohibitions on places where we don't want to require infiltration. If you looked at the state code, it splits it into two pieces: exemptions for sites with very bad soils and prohibitions for sites that are close to a municipal water well or a geologic feature that's going to put it into the groundwater aquifer too quickly, or an industrial site or a gas station.
This has helped me tremendously. Thank you.
Excellent question, by the way. Alder Hanaro?
A question for Eric. Can you comment on removing peak flow, sedimentation, and temperature from the list of things? From
Yeah, I don't think they're any longer relevant to fees in lieu. There could be a development in the future where some kind of regional basin is provided downstream, but I foresee that would be done at the plat level. And, like the developer would build the basin, that becomes a value added to each lot that he sells, that they don't have to provide rate control downstream. But we wouldn't necessarily be charging those landowners fees in lieu to utilize that basin. That would have been taken care of already at the plat level, just like Confluence Pond 20 years ago.
Okay. And then, I agree again with Alder College that this is a complicated ordinance. I disagree with the implication that we, presumably meaning Matt and Eric as well, need to go back and discuss this some more with the WRMC, because I think Matt and Eric are the experts on this complicated topic from a legal and an engineering standpoint. So I see no value in it going back to WRMC. If the council does vote this motion down and refers it back to WRMC, I would want someone to articulate 3 very specific questions to send back to us. Otherwise, when we meet tomorrow, we'll just have the same conversation that we had in February. I'm trying not to feel like the WRMC is being questioned for the work that we have done, because we have spent hours debating this topic and fees in lieu in general. There's at least one member who is not completely clear on what fees in lieu are, who does think it is you pay, and I acknowledge there's a good reason for the confusion, because the name itself implies pay us something instead of doing the stormwater management. That's one of the things we're going to, I hope, change as we go through our thorough review of the entire ordinance in the next year, because it does cause confusion, and I can see why. But I really have to, again, strongly object to not, I'll go back to what Charles Meyer said in his comments, for the city attorney to say that our ordinance might not be completely legal. That should be setting off alarm bells in our minds. And I just encourage alders to vote with our city attorney's recommendation, our stormwater engineer's recommendation, and the WRMC's recommendation.
Okay, before I call on you, Alder Kalish, I want to do a point of order for Brian. The alder had noted that if the council had voted this down, that if it's referred back to have 3.3 questions, and I think this is constructive. However, can you walk me through because I recall that if we vote it down, it just stops. Is that accurate? Or does there need to be a substitute motion if someone wants just to do that? And
I
can you
mean,
walk me through
in
that?
its present configuration as it's on the floor for discussion, a no vote or a majority no vote in this case would mean that discussion on this stops unless there's a subsequent motion to refer it back to committee before that for further discussion. So that would be up to the body to decide how they want to handle that. If it is voted down, then I guess the committee would have to determine whether or not to send it back to council for further consideration at a later date.
Much appreciated. Thank you for that guidance. Alder Hanairo, is that satisfy what you were sort of thinking through?
I just, it does, Madam Chair, except I have a question for Brian. When you said committee, were you referring to LNO or the commission?
I was referring to the commission,
Thank you.
but I guess Eleanor would have a role to play in it as well.
A great clarifying question. Thank you, Alder Hanairo. Alder Kalish?
Oh, yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, if this is referred back to a committee or back to the commission, what would their charge be? And, you know, one of the things that I would recommend would be to review the current language changes and see if they can be altered to address some of these concerns and comments that have been brought up. And still maintain the legal intent and concern regarding this particular issue. But it also incorporates some of the issues, the concerns, the comments that have been brought up. I don't think that level of analysis has been completed to date. I mean, I could be wrong, but it seems like, you know, the level of analysis so far was to look at the existing ordinance. What are we crossing out and what are we keeping? Like I said, I could be wrong. Maybe we haven't had that level of analysis or not, but that's what I would recommend.
So, Brian, can you assist? Is he working on a motion? Is he just having comments? All right, great. All right, is that a
It's just
motion?
comments at the moment.
Are you making a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to
And
refer.
it's a substitute, I'm not trying to cut you off. It's a substitute motion. Is that right, Brian?
It would be in this case, yep.
Okay, great. Go on.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a motion to send this proposed ordinance back to Water Resources Commission to look to, or to review the appropriateness of modifying the language to incorporate the concerns and comments that have been brought up by this committee and license and ordinance and the public to still meet the legal concerns and intent, but also acknowledge those comments and concerns. Don't make me repeat that.
Is there a second?
This is Jackson, I'll second.
Any comments to the substitute motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the substitute motion to refer back, you're going to have to help me, refer back this
Those ordinance changes to the Water Resource Commission.
to Water Resource Commission.
To review concerns raised and still meet legal requirements or legal intent.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion fails, I think 6-2. Does that sound right? Okay. Going back to the original motion. An ordinance to amend section 26 of the Middleton General Ordinances related to stormwater regulations relating to fee and lieu requirements. It was moved by Haniro, seconded by Madden. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 6-2. Moving on to resolutions. Resolutions 2025-14, petitioning the Wisconsin Secretary of Transportation for airport improvement aid. Is there a motion?
Lorman would like to make that motion.
Is there a second?
And I will second.
Any comments?
I just want to comment, Madam Chair, that I'm really glad to see upgrades and equipment related to electrification and decarbonization in this. I think that's great. And I had a question about, do we know whether federal funding is safe?
That's a great question, but I'm going to scope that to the FAA, if I may. Go ahead.
As of now, yes, we believe that the BIL money that had been previously allocated to the city is still available.
Great, thank you.
And just a point of information for clarification, this is not related to requests. I guess I should clarify things a little bit more. This petition request is to provide the list of projects that's in the packet materials. I'm not going to go through and read it all, but it makes all those items eligible, if approved by the Bureau of Aeronautics, available for future state funding and any corresponding federal funding. So yes, whether it's BIL money or any other money from FAA, these projects that are listed on here would be eligible for that and any state related funding.
Questions? All those in favor of approving resolution 2025-14, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to number 2, resolution 2025-15, accepting permanent easement agreement to enable construction of Cayuga Connector Path. Is there a motion?
This is Nelson. I'll move approval as recommended by PRFC.
Lorman will second.
Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving resolution 2025-15, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Number 3, resolution 2025-16, amending the 2025 capital projects fund budget for the Lakeview Tennis Pickleball Court project. Is there a motion?
Question.
Oh, is it clarifying or?
Well, can I make a motion first to,
Please.
as recommended by the Finance and Personnel Committee, I recommend approval of resolution 2025-16.
Is there a second?
Lorman will second.
Thank you so much. And your question, sir?
Yeah, sorry. Just wondering where this is coming from. So the Lakeview East Park allocation, the $44,000, and maybe we don't have staff here to answer that, but just wondering, what are we potentially losing in Lakeview East for this?
Can Parks come to the front to answer that question?
So I don't know if you have the number of that. The 45,000 was a carryover from 20, that part. It's been an item that's been bumped forward. $45,000 would in our planning budget would be planning efforts for Lakeview East Park in 2026. About all the specifics that I have.
Yeah, so it wasn't allocated to a specific project.
That is correct.
So, okay. Thank you.
Good clarifying question. Thank you for that. And thank you to staff. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving resolution 2025-16, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to discussion updates on committees, commissions, and boards by council members. I'm going to look to Alder Nelson first because we ended last committee meeting to discuss the pie eating contest, and we had a great time. So I'm just going to share that all with you. She was amazing.
Let's just note that I will never be a professional contest eater. It's just not in my future. But I am going to update you all on the Civic Campus Committee and give you just a little review and where we are right now. This is such a big project. I'm going to take you all the way back to 2015 when the Middleton Library developed a space needs and building study. And they found that expansion is needed in order for the library to continue to serve the population and the high standards that we have come to expect here in the community. And then in 2019, the city began exploring the needs and the concepts of what a new community campus would look like. And we actually had hired consultants who walked around with wagons with little models in the wagons, and they asked people on the street. And then COVID hit. And so in 2020, that put a stop to that. So we brought it back to life again last year. And so this Community Campus Committee, it's also known as CCC. We have been working with consultants. And so far, we've been focusing on City Hall, the library, and the senior center. They are too small, they're unsecured, and some spaces are inaccessible. City Hall in particular is in poor condition. We've all taken tours and it's downright liability problem. The stairs, some of them. Anyway, it's difficult to deliver high quality city services due to the limitations of the facility. And as our community grows, we're going to need to accommodate that. So the CCC is reviewing options that expand the library, the senior center, and the city hall to accommodate these space needs. So far, we have 6 options that we're trying to narrow down. We're trying to refine the options, review how much it would cost, and to provide updates to you guys whenever we can. These goals we have in mind as we review all of these different options. We're improving sustainability, making more efficient use of city land. Could we shrink our footprint and actually end up with some land that we own that's open? We want to expand some parking wherever we can, putting parking underneath buildings. We want to create more durable and flexible, accessible and user-friendly facilities. And we want to establish a community campus environment that enhances the entire downtown. I will just say this is really exciting and the possibilities are really exciting, but it's also a big challenge for our taxpayers. So we want to keep all of that in mind. We want to keep our city staff safe and happy and create even a better setting for Middleton downtown than we already have. So contact me if you have any questions, but it's really been a cool project. I'm looking forward to having more final, more refined ideas that I can bring to you guys.
Thank you for that. And I heard that for the CDA, our placemaking event planner was hired.
I heard that. It's not, I haven't
Possibly,
heard it
almost.
officially, but
Possibly there, maybe in the next week or two, we'll hear more.
yeah,
Okay.
that's exciting. Great.
So that should help you guys with CDA events.
That
So
will really
much-
help.
Much excited, especially as summer comes. Did you guys have anything?
Sure, I'll give you an airport commission update because you all like to know what's going on there.
I do.
As you know, the city received a letter from the town, and I think it's important that you understand that it is taken seriously by the airport commission to acknowledge the airport is there and that our friends and neighbors to the west would like something said and done about noise. And on 4 separate occasions, over several years, also part of the master plan process, there was extensive noise studies done at the airport. And it really got to, in their report, in summary, simply stating that, you know, the airport should change its flight pattern to essentially just move traffic away from the town. And looking at the history of examining that in the past, in consultation with the FAA, and looking at, you know, current existing best practice rules and standards, one that dates back to 1990 called the Airport Noise Capacity Act. Given the types of aircraft that use our airport, which do involve turbine aircraft, so that would be either propeller-driven turbine aircraft or jets, it would make it extremely difficult to really change the flight pattern, primarily because it would also be a safety concern. And if you keep track of, you know, the town's concern, part of every single one of their agendas going back to 2019 has been consistent reporting of accidents that take place in general aviation airports. So incidents and accidents, you know, at airports. And accidents and incidents take place when things operate outside of standards within the airport environment. So our recommendation was, sure, the traffic at the airport could be moved significantly through a functional north-south available year-round runway. If the town is, you know, gets behind that kind of development, well, then we can reduce significant amounts of traffic going east to west. It's that simple. We have a noise abatement pattern, and the pattern is followed quite well. Typically could be anywhere from 5 to 15 maximum noise complaints that we get. Keep in mind, there's anywhere between 30 and 40,000 operations at that airport a year. And this is, you know, like I said, 5 to 15 reports a month. And those reports are serial reports as well. So it would be, you know, typically 10 reports, but those 10 reports are coming, say, from 3 or 4 people. So
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
So if they're doing 30,000 to 40,000 a year, that's, I'm going to say 3,000 a month and getting
Right.
10 calls
yeah,
on 3,000,
yeah,
give or take, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding the wheelhouse.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But not to minimize, you know, even 10 complaints. A complaint is a complaint.
Yes.
And, you know, people have even taken time to draw pictures of, you know, where they see the airplanes flying. And we're not denying that that's happening. It's happening. Airplanes fly where they fly and they follow a pattern. And so that's where we're at. There are solutions, but the solutions are long-term, complicated, and expensive.
And I appreciate that you acknowledged the letter and that you guys are taking it serious and looking at things.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Any updates over here? I think we've had some long, robust discussions on some committees, so much appreciated. And
Actually, I have a couple if I know it's been a long meeting, but
go for it.
Library board, I talked about it at our last meeting, but the Board of Trustees are a little bit concerned with some recent news. There was an executive order last Friday that requested reducing the federal bureaucracy for a number of institutions, one of which was IMLS, which is the Institute of Museums and Library Services, including budget cuts and staff cuts. The Middleton Public Library doesn't get money directly from IMLS, but DPI, Wisconsin DPI does, and that's who the library actually reports to, is DPI. IMLS also has grants. So we'll probably be discussing ways that we can address some of those concerns and funding issues. For now, we're encouraging people to write to their congressmen and senators at the federal level about how you use the library, how it's a good community space. Why would anybody want to cut money to libraries when it's a good spot for a community and building community? So wanted to bring that up. Also, National Library Week is April 6th to 12th this year, so that is coming up as well. It's again a spotlight for the library and the wonderful programs that we have there.
Are we doing a proclamation for that?
We'll have a proclamation, I believe, at
Excellent.
the April 1st meeting.
Excellent, thank you.
And our bookmobile comes out in April as well, so that
All
will,
great
that will be
news.
coming up.
12th.
Yeah. Also I serve on Fire Commission. And I just want to express my gratitude to the fire department, their professionalism. There was a fire on Saturday at the corner of Century and Parmenter in an apartment building. Their response, I'm actually not surprised at all, and they would probably say it's just what they do normally, but extremely windy conditions, their ability to contain the fire to where it was, reports of individuals possibly in the apartment building, their bravery, making sure everybody's safe, not just in that building, but around that building, along with lots of support from police and EMS, just our emergency services here. But I know that the fire department is very proud of the work that they do and the quality of the work that they do. So I think it showed up on Saturday with that fire. So
Thank you for bringing us around to that, and we all support everything you just said. I'm sorry I'm speaking for you all, but it's getting tired and late. So I heard from residents in Alder Jackson's district, and I think in your district and Norman's district, who were just grateful for that response, because I know it kind of comes together. So just echoing what you said. So thanks to our emergency responders, but especially our firefighters. Very good. Moving on to convening into closed session. And Brian, can you assist with this?
Yes, so I'll need a motion and a second to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.851E for deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session. Discussion of negotiating topics and strategy for negotiations with the town of Middleton for a cooperative boundary agreement.
Norman will make that motion.
The Madden will second.
Okay, for roll call, please indicate a yes to convene in closed session. Madden,
Yes.
Kalish,
Yes.
Mayor Kuhn,
Yes.
Alder Nelson,
Yes.
Alder Jackson,
Yes.
Alder Haniro,
Yes.
Alder Lorman,
Yes.
Alder Crow.
yes.
Give us a couple minutes here.